StudyJesus.com presents Bible Stories, where biblical stories of the ages come alive.
We now continue with our series of Bible stories from the Old Testament with a true story found in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1, through Genesis chapter 9, verse 19, titled, The Great Ship That Saved 8 People.
StudyJesus.com presents Bible Stories with your host, Dr. Joe Jackson. Stories directly from God's holy word, told in easy-to-understand story form that the whole family will enjoy, and featuring the work of a talented artist illustrating each week's story. Now gather the family because it's time for this week's Bible Story.
After Abel was slain and his brother Cain had gone into another land, God once again gave a child to Adam and Eve, and this child they named Seth. And other sons and daughters were given to them also, for Adam and Eve lived many years. But at last they died, as God had said that they must die, because they'd eaten of the tree that God had forbidden them to eat. By the time Adam died, there were many people on the earth, for the children of Adam and Eve had many other children, and many of these, when they grew up, also had children, and these too had children. And in those early times, people lived much longer than they do now. Very few people now live to be 100 years old. But in those days, when the earth was new, men often lived to be 800 or even 900 years old. So after a time, that part of the earth where Adam's sons lived began to be full of people. It's sad that as time went on, more and more of these people became wicked, and fewer of them grew up to become good men and women. All the people lived near together, and few went away to other lands. So it came to pass that even the children of good men and women learned to be bad like the people around them. And as God looked down on the world that he had made, he saw how wicked men had become, and that their every thought and every act was evil. But while most of the people in the world were very wicked, there were some good people also, although there were very few. The best of all the men who lived in that time was a man whose name was Enoch. This was not the son of Cain, but another Enoch, who came from the family of Seth, the son of Adam, who was born after the death of Abel. While so many around Enoch were doing evil, this man did only what was right. For 300 years he walked with God. And at last, when Enoch was 365 years old, God took him away from the earth to heaven. He didn't die, as all people except one have died since Adam disobeyed God. But as the Bible said, he was not, for God took him. This means that Enoch was taken up from earth without dying. Enoch left a son whose name was Methuselah. We don't know anything about Methuselah except that he lived to be 969 years old, which was longer than the life of any other man who ever lived. But at last, Methuselah died, like all his people, except for his father Enoch. By the time Methuselah died, the world was very wicked, and God looked down on the earth and said, I will take away all men from the earth that I've made, because the men of the world are evil, and evil continually. But even in those bad times, God saw one good man. His name was Noah. Noah tried to do right in the sight of God. As Enoch had walked with God, so Noah walked with God and talked with him. And Noah had 3 sons. Their names were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. God said to Noah, the time has come when all the men and women on the earth are to be destroyed. Everyone must die because they're all wicked. But you and your family shall be saved because you alone are trying to do right. And then God told Noah how he might save his life and the lives of his sons. He was to build a very large boat, as large as many of the largest ships that are made even in our time, very long and very wide and very deep, with a roof over it, and made like a long, wide house in 3 stories, but built so that it would float on the water. Such a ship as this was called an ark. God told Noah to build this ark and to have it ready for the time when he would need it. God said to Noah, for I'm going to bring a great flood of water on the earth to cover all the land and to drown all the wicked people on the earth. And as the animals on the earth will be drowned along with the people, you must make the ark large enough to hold a pair of each kind of animal and several pairs of some animals that are needed by men, like sheep and goats and oxen, so that there will be animals as well as men to live upon the earth after the flood has passed away. And you must take into the ark food for yourself and your family and for all the animals with you, enough food to last for a year while the flood shall stay on the earth. So Noah and his wife and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, with their wives, went into the ark. And God brought to the door of the ark the animals and the birds and the creeping things of all kinds, and they went into the ark. And Noah and his sons put them in their places and brought in food for all of them. And then the door of the ark was shut, so that no more people and no more animals could come in. In a few days, the rain began to fall as it had never fallen before. It seemed as though the heavens were opened to pour great floods upon the earth. The streams filled and the rivers rose higher and higher, and the ark began to float on the water. The people left their houses and ran up to the hills, but soon the hills were covered and all the people on them were drowned. Some had even climbed up to the tops of the higher mountains, but the water continued to rise higher and higher until even the mountains were covered, and all the people, wicked as they had been, were drowned in the great sea that now rolled over all the earth where men had lived. And all the animals, the tame animals, cattle and sheep and oxen, were drowned. And the wild animals, lions and tigers and all the others, were also drowned. Even the birds were drowned, for their nests in the trees were swept away, and there was no place where they could fly to get away from the terrible storm. For 40 days and nights, the rain kept coming until there was no breath of life remaining outside of the ark. After 40 days, the rain stopped, but the water stayed on the earth for more than 6 months, and the ark with all that were in it floated over the great sea that covered all the land. And then God sent a wind to blow over the waters and to dry them up, so that little by little the waters grew less and less. First the mountains rose above the waters, and then the hills rose, and finally the ark ceased to float and lay aground on a mountain which is called Mount Ararat. But Noah couldn't see what happened on the earth because the door was shut and the window may have been in the roof. But he felt that the ark was no longer moving, and he knew then that the water must have gone down. So, after waiting for a time, Noah opened a window and let loose a bird called a raven. Now the raven has strong wings, and this raven flew round and round until the waters had gone down, and it couldn't find a place to rest, and it didn't come back to the ark. Since the raven didn't come back, Noah sent out a dove, but the dove couldn't find any place to rest, so it flew back to the ark, and Noah took it into the ark again. And then Noah waited a week longer, and afterwards he sent out the dove again. And at the evening time, the dove came back to the ark, which was its home, and in its bill was a fresh leaf, which it had picked from an olive tree. So Noah knew then that the water had gone down enough to let the trees grow once more. He waited another week and sent out the dove again. But this time, the dove flew away and never came back. And Noah knew then that the earth was becoming dry again. So he took off a part of the roof and looked out, and he saw that there was dry land all around the ark. Noah had now lived in the ark a little more than a year, and he was glad to see the green land and the trees once again. And God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark with your wife and your sons and their wives and all the living things that are with you in the ark." Precious memories, unseen angels, sent from somewhere to my soul.